The crack of a pistol shot echoed through the dusty main street of Redemption Creek, as Zara Blackwood's father crumpled to the ground, his blood seeping into the parched earth of the Colorado Territory. The year was 1878, and in that single moment, Zara's world shattered like fine china dropped on a stone floor. "Papa!" she screamed, rushing forward only to be held back by her uncle's firm grip. "Stay back, girl," he hissed. "They'll kill you too." Three men on horseback wheeled around, dust billowing beneath their mounts' hooves. The leader, a man with a face as scarred as his soul, tipped his hat mockingly toward the gathering crowd. "Let that be a lesson to anyone thinking of cheating Samuel Thornton," he called out, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent street. "No man crosses me and lives to tell about it." Zara's vision blurred with tears as she watched the murderers ride away, her father's lifeless body a crumpled heap in the dirt. At 22, she had already endured more than her share of loss her mother to consumption 3 years prior, and now her father gunned down in broad daylight over a land dispute with the territory's most ruthless cattle baron. That day, as they lowered James Blackwood into the ground, Zara made a silent vow. She would never trust another man as long as she lived. Men were greedy, violent creatures who took what they wanted with no regard for those they hurt along the way. Her father had been the exception, and now he was gone. "You'll come live with us," her aunt said afterward, patting Zara's hand sympathetically. "A woman alone can't manage that homestead." Zara pulled her hand away. "I'll manage just fine." And she did for 3 years. She worked the small farm her father had built, keeping to herself and turning away any man who came calling with offers of help that always seemed to involve marriage and surrendering her independence. The women in town called her stubborn. The men called her worse. Zara didn't care. She had her land, her small herd of cattle, and her solitude until the drought of 1881 changed everything. The creek that fed her land slowed to a trickle, then stopped altogether. Her cattle grew thin, and her crops withered in the relentless sun. When Samuel Thornton sent one of his men with an offer to buy her out for a fraction of what the land was worth, Zara knew she was running out of options. "No," she said flatly, not bothering to invite the messenger inside. "Mr. Thornton already stole enough from me when he murdered my father." The man, little more than a boy, really shifted uncomfortably. "Madam, Mr. Thornton says to tell you he'll get this land one way or another, says you'd be smart to take his offer." "Tell Mr. Thornton he can go to hell," Zara replied, slamming the door in the young man's face. That night, she sat at her kitchen table cleaning her father's revolver by lamplight. She knew what would come next. Thornton's men would return, and this time they wouldn't bother with offers. She loaded each chamber deliberately, her hands steady despite the fear knotting her stomach. The sound of approaching horses in the pre-dawn hours confirmed her fears. Zara positioned herself by the window, revolver ready. But instead of Thornton's men, a single rider approached a stranger leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. The man dismounted slowly, raising his hands when he spotted her silhouette in the window. "Madam, I mean no harm," he called out. "Name's Flynn McAllister. I'm looking for work." "Keep moving," Zara called back. "I'm not hiring." The stranger Flynn removed his hat, revealing hair the color of sun-bleached wheat and a face weathered by years in the saddle. "With respect, it looks like you could use some help. Your cattle are about half starved, and that south fence line is down in 3 places." Zara's finger tightened on the trigger. "How would you know about my fence line?" Rode the perimeter before approaching. "Old habit." He gestured toward his pack horse. "I've got tools and know-how. I'm offering fair work for fair pay." "I can't pay you," Zara said bluntly. "The drought's seen to that." Flynn nodded thoughtfully. Then how about this? I'll work for room and board. Got nowhere particular to be, and it looks like you might be expecting trouble." As if on cue, the distant sound of multiple riders approached from the east, the direction of Thornton's ranch. Flynn's expression hardened as he glanced toward the sound. "Seems like trouble's already found you. Mind if I stable my horses in your barn? Might be best if they aren't seen just yet." Against her better judgment, Zara found herself nodding. "Around back, and be quick about it." Flynn led his horses behind the small farmhouse just as 5 riders appeared on the horizon. Zara closed her eyes briefly, steeling herself, then stepped onto her porch, revolver partially concealed in the folds of her skirt. The riders approached slowly, deliberately. At their head rode a man Zara recognized immediately: Silas Cooper, Thornton's foreman and the man who had pulled the trigger on her father 3 years ago. "Miss Blackwood," Cooper called out, his thin lips twisted in a mockery of a smile. "Mr. Thornton sent me to check if you'd reconsidered his generous offer." "My answer hasn't changed," Zara replied, her voice steady despite the hatred burning in her chest. Cooper sighed theatrically. "That's a shame. Seems there's been a lot of trouble with rustlers lately." "Dangerous for a woman alone." His hand rested casually on his holstered pistol. "Accidents happen." "Is that a threat, Mr. Cooper?" she asked coolly. "Just stating facts, madam. This territory's no place for a woman without protection." His eyes narrowed. "You've got 1 week to clear out, Mr. Thornton's being generous, considering." Zara stood straighter. "Considering what? That he murdered my father and now wants to steal my land too?" Cooper's face darkened. "You'd be wise to mind that tongue of yours, woman. James Blackwood died because he was a thief. And it seems the apple doesn't fall far from the tree." "My father never stole anything in his life," Zara shot back, her grip tightening on the hidden revolver. "He stole water," Cooper spat. "Diverted it from Thornton land to feed your miserable little patch. We have witnesses." "That's a lie." Zara took a step forward, fury overwhelming caution. Cooper's hand moved to his gun, but before he could draw, a calm voice spoke from the side of the house. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Flynn stepped into view, a Winchester rifle held casually but competently in his hands. He'd positioned himself perfectly, not directly beside Zara, but at an angle that gave him a clear shot at all 5 men. "This doesn't concern you, stranger," Cooper growled. Flynn smiled pleasantly, though his eyes remained cold. "I've just been hired as Miss Blackwood's ranch hand. Protecting her property is now very much my concern." Cooper's eyes flicked from Flynn to Zara and back again, clearly recalculating his odds. After a tense moment, he yanked his horse's reins, turning the animal sharply. "1 week," he said over his shoulder. "Then we'll be back, and no hired gun is going to stop us." As the riders disappeared in a cloud of dust, Zara turned to Flynn, her expression a mixture of relief and suspicion. "I didn't hire you," she said. Flynn lowered his rifle. "No, madam, you didn't, but they don't need to know that." He studied her face for a moment. "Those men mean to take your land by force if necessary. I've seen their kind before." "Why would you help me?" Zara demanded. "You don't know me." Flynn shrugged. "Let's just say I've got no love for men who threaten women, and even less for land grabbers like Thornton." He gestured toward the barn. "Now, about that room and board." Zara hesitated, every instinct warning her not to trust this stranger. And yet, he had just positioned himself between her and certain danger without hesitation. "You can sleep in the barn," she said finally. "There's a small room my father used for tack, and I'll feed you, but that's all I'm offering." Flynn nodded. "Fair enough." He glanced toward the empty creek bed that curved around the eastern edge of her property. "Your cattle need water. How far to the nearest working well?" 5 miles on the Jackson place, Zara replied. But they've been struggling too. They can't spare it. Flynn scratched his chin thoughtfully. I noticed signs of an underground spring near your north property line. With some digging, we might be able to tap it. Zara's eyes narrowed with suspicion. How would you know about springs? Spent some time with the Shoshone up in Wyoming territory. They taught me a thing or two about finding water where others can't. He shouldered his rifle. I'll start on that fence line first, though. No point finding water if your cattle can wander off before they drink it. As Flynn walked toward the barn to retrieve his tools, Zara watched him with wary eyes. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to hard work and hard country. His offer of help had come at exactly the right moment, suspiciously so. "Mr. McAllister," she called after him. "How did you happen to ride onto my land just when Thornton's men were coming?" Flynn paused and looked back at her. "Heard talk in town about Thornton squeezing out smaller ranchers. Figured I'd ride the boundaries, see if anyone needed an extra hand." His eyes met hers directly. "I've got no love for bullies, Miss Blackwood. Never have." With that, he continued toward the barn, leaving Zara to wonder if she just made the smartest decision of her life or the most dangerous one. The next morning dawned hot and cloudless, the drought showing no signs of breaking. Zara rose before the sun, as was her habit, only to discover Flynn already at work on the south fence line. She watched from the kitchen window as he methodically replaced broken posts and stretched new wire, his movements efficient and practiced. By midday, when Zara brought him water and a simple meal of beans and cornbread, he had repaired nearly half the damaged fence. "You work quickly," she observed, handing him the tin cup of water. Flynn drank deeply before answering. "Fence won't fix itself." He wiped his brow with a bandana. "After I finish here, I'd like to start exploring for that spring." Zara crossed her arms. "You really think you can find water where there isn't any? Water's there," Flynn replied with quiet confidence. "Just a matter of reaching it." He studied her face for a moment. "You don't trust easily, do you, Miss Blackwood?" "I've found little reason to," she answered stiffly. Flynn nodded, seeming unsurprised by her response. "Fair enough. Trust is earned, not given." He handed her back the empty cup. "Thank you for the meal." As the day wore on, Zara found herself watching Flynn more than attending to her own chores. There was something about the way he worked, methodical, focused, wasting no movement, that spoke of a man who knew exactly who he was and what he was capable of. By sunset, the fence was repaired, and Flynn had begun examining the northern edge of her property, walking slowly with his eyes on the ground, occasionally kneeling to examine the soil or sparse vegetation. "Found something?" Zara asked, approaching as he knelt for the third time in the same area. Flynn nodded, scooping up a handful of soil and letting it sift through his fingers. "The grass here is different, greener, despite the drought, and the soil's damper." He pointed to a slight depression in the land. "Water's not far below the surface here. With some digging and the right setup, we could have a working well within a week." "A week is all we have," Zara reminded him, thinking of Cooper's threat. Flynn's eyes met hers. "Then we'd better get started at first light." That night, as Zara prepared a simple supper, she found herself wondering about the mysterious man who had appeared so fortuitously at her doorstep. Flynn ate at the small table in her kitchen, and despite her reservations, she found herself sitting across from him rather than sending him to eat in the barn. "Where are you from originally, Mr. McAllister?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Missouri," he answered. "Left when I was 16. Been moving ever since." "Why did you leave?" Flynn's expression closed slightly. "War came. Then it ended. Home wasn't home anymore." Zara nodded, understanding in her eyes. The war had changed everything for so many. "And what brought you to Colorado?" Heard the territory needed good men. A faint smile touched his lips. Or maybe I just got tired of Texas heat. You haven't asked why Thornton's men are after my land, Zara observed. Flynn shrugged. Figured you'd tell me if you wanted me to know. Zara studied him for a moment, then made a decision. 3 years ago, Samuel Thornton accused my father of stealing water rights. He sent his men, including Silas Cooper, to talk to my father. Her voice hardened. They shot him in the street in broad daylight. No trial, no chance to defend himself. Flynn's expression darkened. And the law did nothing. The sheriff is Thornton's cousin, Zara said bitterly. He ruled it's self-defense, said my father drew first. Every witness who said otherwise suddenly changed their story or left town. And now Thornton wants your land, Flynn concluded. He's always wanted it. The creek that runs through my property, when there's water in it, feeds into his grazing lands. He claims my father diverted water that was rightfully his. Zara's hands clenched into fists on the table. It's a lie. The creek has always run this way. My father would never steal. Flynn was quiet for a moment. Men like Thornton don't stop until they get what they want or until someone stops them. Is that why you're here? Zara asked directly. To stop him. Flynn held her gaze steadily. I'm here because I saw someone who needed help against a bully. Nothing more complicated than that. Zara wanted to believe him, but experience had taught her harsh lessons about men and their motives. Thornton has 20 men who ride for him. What do you think one man can do against those odds? Flynn's smile was slight but genuine. You'd be surprised what one determined person can accomplish, Miss Blackwood. He stood, taking his empty plate to the wash basin. Thank you for the meal. I'll see you at first light. As he walked out toward the barn, Zara found herself watching him longer than necessary, a strange flutter in her chest that she immediately suppressed. Whatever Flynn McAllister's true motives, she would be a fool to let down her guard or to forget the vow she'd made at her father's grave. True to his word, Flynn began digging at sunrise the next morning. Zara brought him tools from her father's shed: shovels, picks, and lengths of wooden pipe her father had crafted for irrigation but never used. By midday, Flynn had dug down nearly 6 feet and the bottom of the hole was becoming muddy. By late afternoon, there were several inches of water collecting, seeping up from the earth below. We've hit it, Flynn called up to her, his face streaked with dirt but his eyes alight with triumph. Bring me those pipes. We'll need to shore up the sides and create a proper well. Working together, they assembled a rudimentary but functional well. By sunset, clean, clear water was being drawn up in the bucket Zara had attached to a rope and pulley system. It's not much, Flynn said, watching as she drank deeply from a dipper, but it's enough to water your cattle and maybe even irrigate a small garden plot. Zara looked at him, really looked at him for perhaps the first time. His clothes were caked with mud, his hands blistered from the day's labor, but there was no complaint in his manner, only quiet satisfaction at a job well done. Why are you really helping me? She asked softly. Flynn's gaze remained on the well. Everyone deserves a fighting chance, Miss Blackwood. Thornton's taken that from too many people. He finally looked at her. Besides, you remind me of someone I used to know. Who? A shadow passed over his face. My sister. She was just as stubborn as you. His use of the past tense told Zara all she needed to know. The war, she asked gently. Flynn shook his head. After, men like Thornton moved in when there was no law to speak of. She refused to give up our family's land. His jaw tightened. I was away, riding with a cattle drive up to Kansas. By the time I got back, he didn't need to finish. Zara understood all too well. I'm sorry, she said simply. Flynn nodded once, acknowledgement of her sympathy without wallowing in it. Let's get some of this water to your cattle. They look about ready to drop. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Flynn worked from dawn to dusk, reinforcing the well, creating a simple irrigation system to a small garden plot Zara had started, and continuing to strengthen the property's defenses. Zara, for her part, found herself working alongside him more often than not, their initial wariness gradually giving way to a respectful partnership. On the fourth day, as they worked together to repair the roof of the small barn, Flynn suddenly went still, his head tilted slightly. "Riders coming," he said quietly. "At least 3. Zara's hand immediately went to the revolver she now wore openly on her hip. "Thornton's men," Flynn shook his head. "Don't think so, coming from the wrong direction." He climbed down from the roof with fluid ease, retrieving his rifle from where it leaned against the barn wall. "Stay behind me." They moved to the front of the house just as 3 riders came into view. Zara felt a surge of relief when she recognized the lead rider. "It's Marshal Finley from over in Silverton," she told Flynn. "He's a good man, one of the few who spoke up after my father was killed." Flynn's posture relaxed slightly, though he kept his rifle ready. "Wonder what brings a marshal out this far from his jurisdiction." The riders approached at an unhurried pace, the marshal raising a hand in greeting as they drew near. He was an older man with iron-gray hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent decades in the harsh mountain sun. "Miss Blackwood," he called out as he reined in his horse. "Been a while." "Marshal Finley," Zara acknowledged with a nod. "What brings you to Redemption Creek?" The marshal dismounted, removing his hat respectfully. "Got word that Samuel Thornton's been pushing to take your land." His eyes flicked to Flynn. "Heard there might be trouble brewing." Flynn stepped forward, extending his hand. "Flynn McAllister." The marshal shook his hand, assessing him with experienced eyes. "You the hired gun I heard about, just a ranch hand," Flynn replied evenly. Marshal Finley's expression suggested he didn't entirely believe that, but he nodded anyway. "Well, Mr. McAllister, you should know that Thornton's been gathering his men. Word in town is they are planning to ride out here tomorrow." Zara's stomach knotted with fear, though she kept her expression neutral. "Tomorrow's when their deadline expires." The marshal turned to his companions, a younger deputy, and a man Zara didn't recognize. "This here's my deputy, Williams, and this is Judge Carlton from the territorial court." The judge, a dignified man in his 50s, inclined his head. "Miss Blackwood, I've reviewed the documentation Marshal Finley brought to my attention regarding your property dispute with Mr. Thornton." Zara frowned in confusion. "Documentation?" Marshal Finley reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather folder. "Original survey maps of this region, filed when the territory was first opened for settlement, shows clearly that the creek runs naturally through your property before reaching Thornton land. Where did you get those?" Zara asked, stunned. Her father had always maintained that such documents existed, but all copies had mysteriously disappeared from the county records office after Thornton arrived. The marshal's eyes flickered briefly to Flynn before returning to Zara. "Let's just say they turned up recently." "Along with sworn statements from 2 former Thornton hands about what really happened the day your father was killed." Zara turned to Flynn, questions in her eyes, but his expression revealed nothing. Judge Carlton cleared his throat. "Based on this evidence, I've issued an injunction against Samuel Thornton. He is legally prohibited from taking any action against your property or person while the territorial court reviews the case." He handed Zara an official-looking document bearing the territorial seal. "Will that stop him?" Flynn asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. The marshal's expression hardened. "It should, but Thornton's not known for respecting the law when it doesn't suit him." He gestured to himself and his deputy. "That's why we'll be staying until his men show up tomorrow." A judge's order carries more weight when there's a badge and a gun to back it up. Relief washed over Zara, though she knew better than to think this would be the end of Thornton's attempts to take her land. Still, it was the first real hope she'd felt in years. "You're welcome to stay the night," she offered. "It's a small house, but we brought tents," the marshal assured her. "Used to sleeping rough. If you don't mind, we'll set up near your barn." As the men led their horses toward the barn, Zara turned to Flynn, who was watching them go with an unreadable expression. "Did you have something to do with this?" she asked directly. Flynn's eyes met hers. "I may have sent a message to an old friend in Silverton after I first arrived. Mentioned that the situation here didn't seem right. An old friend who happens to be a marshal." A ghost of a smile touched Flynn's lips. "We served together. Before." Zara studied him, seeing him in a new light. "You're not just a drifting ranch hand, are you?" "I'm exactly what I said I am, Miss Blackwood," Flynn replied. "A man looking for honest work." He nodded toward the document in her hand. "But I also believe in justice. Your father deserved it, so do you." Before Zara could respond, Marshal Finley called Flynn over to help set up their camp. As he walked away, Zara found herself wondering just who Flynn McAllister really was, and why the thought of him leaving once this was resolved left her feeling strangely hollow. That evening, after a simple but hearty meal shared with their guests, Zara found Flynn sitting alone on her porch, cleaning his rifle with methodical care. "May I join you?" she asked, hovering in the doorway. Flynn nodded, setting the rifle aside and moving over on the bench to make room for her. They sat in companionable silence for a few moments, watching as the last light faded from the western sky, painting the clouds in shades of gold and crimson. "Beautiful country," Flynn remarked quietly. "I can see why your father chose this land. He used to say the sunsets alone were worth the price," Zara replied, smiling at the memory. "My mother thought he was crazy, giving up a comfortable life back east for this wilderness, but she came to love it as much as he did. And you? Do you love it too?" Zara considered the question. "It's the only home I've ever known. Every rock, every tree holds a memory." She looked out across the land that had shaped her life. "Yes, I love it, enough to fight for it." Flynn nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Some things are worth fighting for. Like justice for your sister?" Zara asked gently. A muscle tightened in Flynn's jaw. "That's a long story." "We have time," Zara said, surprising herself with how much she wanted to hear it to understand this man who had ridden into her life like a character from one of the dime novels sold in the general store. Flynn was quiet for so long that Zara thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, meant only for her ears. "After the war, I drifted. Took whatever work I could find, cattle drives mostly. My sister Caroline stayed on our family land in Missouri." His hand stilled on the rifle. "A man named Harlan Drake decided he wanted our valley for his own. Started buying up all the neighboring farms. Those who wouldn't sell faced accidents, fires, livestock dying mysteriously." "Like Thornton," Zara murmured. Flynn nodded. "Cut from the same cloth." "Caroline wrote to me asking for help. I was in Dodge City when her letter found me. Took me 3 weeks to get home." His voice tightened. "I was too late. They'd burned her out. She died in the fire." Zara's hand moved involuntarily to cover his. "I'm sorry." Flynn turned his hand over, briefly squeezing hers before letting go. Drake had bought the sheriff by then. No justice to be had through the law. His eyes, when they met hers, were haunted. "So I found my own justice." "You killed him," Zara said. "It wasn't a question." "I made sure he could never hurt anyone else," Flynn replied carefully. "Afterward, I couldn't stay. Too many memories." He picked up his cleaning cloth again. Been drifting ever since. Taking work where I can find it, helping where I can. Is that why you stopped here, to help? Flynn's expression softened slightly. Partly, but I also needed to stop running sometime. He looked at her directly. Your situation reminded me of what happened to Caroline. I couldn't ride past and do nothing. Zara found herself unable to look away from his gaze. In the fading light, his eyes held a warmth that stirred something within her, something she had thought long dead. Thank you, she said simply, for everything you've done. Flynn shook his head. Don't thank me yet. Thornton's men will still come tomorrow. A piece of paper may not stop them. But you will, Zara asked, studying his face. If necessary, he replied, his tone leaving no doubt of his resolve. They sat together a while longer, the silence between them comfortable now, until the chill of the evening air finally drove Zara inside. As she bid Flynn good night, she realized with a start that for the first time in 3 years, she was beginning to trust a man again, a dangerous prospect indeed. Morning brought a heavy mist that clung to the land, shrouding the distant hills and lending an otherworldly quality to the homestead. By the time the sun burned through the fog, Marshal Finley, his deputy, Judge Carlton, Flynn, and Zara had positioned themselves in front of the house, waiting. They didn't have to wait long. The thunder of approaching hoofbeats announced the arrival of Thornton's men well before they emerged from the mist, a formidable force of at least 15 riders, with Samuel Thornton himself and Silas Cooper at their head. The riders pulled up short when they spotted the marshal and judge standing alongside Zara and Flynn. "What's this?" Thornton demanded, his florid face contorted with anger. "Finley, you're outside your jurisdiction." Marshal Finley stepped forward, his badge catching the morning light. "I'm here at the request of Judge Carlton of the Territorial Court." He held up a document. "He's issued an injunction against you, Thornton. You're legally prohibited from taking any action against Miss Blackwood or her property." Thornton's face darkened further as he turned to the judge. "On what grounds?" Judge Carlton's voice rang out clear and authoritative. "On the grounds that we have evidence showing you falsified property records and water rights claims. We also have sworn testimony that you ordered the murder of James Blackwood to acquire his land unlawfully." A murmur ran through the gathered men. Thornton raised a hand to silence them, his eyes cold with fury. "Lies," he spat. "And even if they weren't, your authority means nothing out here, Judge. This is my territory. The law applies everywhere in Colorado Territory, Mr. Thornton," the judge replied evenly, "even to men who think themselves above it." Cooper leaned in to whisper something to Thornton, who nodded slowly, a calculating look crossing his face. "Very well," Thornton said finally. "We'll let the courts decide for now." His gaze shifted to Zara, hatred evident in every line of his face. "But this isn't over, girl. Not by a long shot." As Thornton's men began to turn their horses, Cooper lingered, his eyes fixed on Flynn with unmistakable recognition. "I know you," he said slowly. "You're the one they call the Ghost Rider, the man who killed Harlan Drake over in Missouri." A thin smile spread across his face. "There's a bounty on your head, McAllister." Flynn's expression remained impassive. "If you're thinking of collecting it, Cooper, you should know that Drake's fate wasn't unique." The threat hung in the air between them. After a tense moment, Cooper wheeled his horse around to join the retreating men. Once Thornton and his men had disappeared from sight, Marshal Finley turned to Flynn with raised eyebrows. "Ghost Rider," Flynn shrugged. "People talk, names stick." The marshal studied him thoughtfully. "Drake had it coming from what I heard. Man was a monster." He adjusted his hat. "Good thing I'm not looking for bounties today. Just upholding the law." Zara looked between them. a chill running down her spine as she realized just how dangerous the man she had welcomed onto her property might be. Judge Carlton cleared his throat. "Miss Blackwood, the injunction will hold for now, but I suggest you come to Denver next month for the formal hearing. Bring any documentation you have regarding your father's ownership of this land." Zara nodded, still processing what she had just learned about Flynn. "I will, Your Honor." "Thank you." As the marshal, deputy, and judge prepared to depart, Flynn helped them saddle their horses, speaking quietly with Marshal Finley out of Zara's earshot. When they had gone, an uncomfortable silence fell between Zara and Flynn. She stood on the porch, arms crossed defensively across her chest, while he remained in the yard, hat in hand, waiting for her to speak first. "Were you ever going to tell me," she finally asked, "about who you really are?" Flynn met her gaze steadily. "I told you who I am. A man looking for work and willing to help someone in need." He took a step toward the porch. "The rest, it's part of my past, not who I am now." "A man with a bounty on his head," Zara said, her voice tight. "A killer." "I've never killed a man who didn't deserve killing," Flynn replied quietly. "And never for money or pleasure." Zara wanted to be angry with him for his deception, but found she couldn't summon the emotion. In the week since Flynn had arrived, he had worked tirelessly to help her, had risked his life to protect her land, had given her the first real hope she'd felt in years. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice softening slightly. Flynn placed his hat back on his head. "That depends on you, Miss Blackwood. The immediate danger's past, but Thornton won't give up easily. He'll try again one way or another. And you, will you stay?" The question left her lips before she could consider its implications. Flynn studied her face, something warm kindling in his eyes. "If you want me to." Zara uncrossed her arms, her defenses lowering inch by inch. "I still have that fence on the north side that needs mending. And the barn roof isn't finished." A smile tugged at the corner of Flynn's mouth. "Sounds like you could use a ranch hand for a while longer." "For a while," Zara agreed, returning his smile tentatively, and so Flynn stayed. Days stretched into weeks as they worked side by side to restore the ranch to its former prosperity. The well he had dug provided enough water to keep the cattle healthy and even irrigate a small kitchen garden. Together they repaired fences, reinforced the barn, and even built a new chicken coop to replace the one that had collapsed the previous winter. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the dynamic between them shifted. Zara found herself looking forward to their shared meals, to the quiet conversations they had on the porch in the evenings as the sun set over the mountains. Flynn's presence, once unsettling, became a comfort, a steady, reliable constant in a world that had shown her little kindness. A month after Thornton's men had been turned away, Zara and Flynn made the journey to Denver for the court hearing. The territorial judge ruled definitively in Zara's favor, formally recognizing her clear title to the land and dismissing Thornton's claims as fraudulent. More significantly, based on the testimony of former Thornton hands, the judge ordered the arrest of Silas Cooper for the murder of James Blackwood. Samuel Thornton himself was implicated as having ordered the killing, though he had fled the territory before he could be arrested, his empire crumbling as other victims of his schemes came forward with their own claims. "It's over," Zara said as they rode back toward Redemption Creek, the weight of 3 years of fear and anger finally lifting from her shoulders. "I can hardly believe it." Flynn rode beside her, his posture relaxed but alert as always. "Your father would be proud." "You fought for what was right and won." "We fought," Zara corrected him. "I couldn't have done it without you." Flynn shook his head. "You're stronger than you know, Zara. You would have found a way." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the rhythm of the horses' hooves a soothing counterpoint to Zara's racing thoughts. "What will you do now?" she finally asked as they crested a hill overlooking her land, their land, as she had begun to think of it in the privacy of her own mind. Flynn drew his horse to a halt, gazing out over the valley. "Hadn't thought that far ahead," he admitted. "Been taking life one day at a time for so long." Zara gathered her courage, turning in her saddle to face him directly. "You could stay. Permanently, I mean. The ranch is doing better, but it's too much for one person. I could use a partner." Flynn's eyes, when they met hers, held a question. "A business partner?" "That too," Zara said softly, her heart pounding against her ribs. A slow smile spread across Flynn's face, warming his eyes and softening the hard lines of his weathered features. "I'd like that," he said simply. "Very much." That evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, Flynn took Zara's hand in his touch gentle but sure. "When I first rode onto your land, I wasn't looking for anything more than temporary work," he said, his voice low and earnest. "I certainly wasn't looking for this," he gestured between them. "But sometimes life gives you what you need, not what you're looking for." Zara squeezed his hand, marveling at how natural it felt now, this connection with a man she had once been determined to mistrust. "I swore after my father died that I would never trust another man," she confessed. "I thought they were all like Thornton, greedy, cruel, caring only for themselves." "Most aren't," Flynn said. "Most are just trying to make their way in a hard world, same as you." "I know that now." Zara looked up at him, seeing in his face everything she had come to admire: strength without cruelty, confidence without arrogance, a quiet dignity that had nothing to prove. "You showed me that." Flynn's free hand came up to gently touch her cheek. "May I kiss you, Zara Blackwood?" Instead of answering, Zara leaned forward, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers with surprising tenderness, the kiss a promise and a beginning all at once. When they finally drew apart, Flynn rested his forehead against hers. "I've been half in love with you since the day you stood on this porch with a revolver, ready to face down Thornton's men all by yourself." Zara laughed softly. "And I've been fighting my feelings for you since you dug that well and brought life back to my land." She drew back slightly to look into his eyes. "I was so afraid to trust again, to risk being hurt. And now I'm still afraid," she admitted, "but I'm more afraid of missing what could be." She took a deep breath. "I love you, Flynn McAllister. Ghost rider or ranch hand or whatever name you go by, I love the man you are." Flynn's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "And I love you, Zara Blackwood. Have almost from the first moment, though I tried my damnedest not to." "Why?" she asked, curious. "Because I didn't think I deserved someone like you," he said honestly. "Still don't, if I'm being truthful, but I'm selfish enough to want you anyway." Zara kissed him again, more boldly this time. "Good, because you're stuck with me now." As autumn gave way to winter, Zara and Flynn settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. The ranch prospered under their joint care, the herd growing healthier and more numerous. Flynn's knowledge of animal husbandry complemented Zara's skill with crops, and together they turned the modest homestead into one of the most productive small ranches in the area. Word spread through the territory of Samuel Thornton's downfall and subsequent disappearance. His ranch was divided and sold at auction, much of the land going to the small farmers and ranchers he had once terrorized. Silas Cooper was tried and convicted for James Blackwood's murder, bringing a measure of justice that Zara had almost given up hoping for. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell gently outside the window of the small but cozy house, Flynn knelt before Zara with a simple gold band, one that had belonged to his mother, carefully preserved through years of wandering. "I'm not a man of many possessions," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But everything I am, everything I have, is yours if you'll have me. Marry me, Zara." Tears welled in Zara's eyes as she pulled him to his feet. "Yes," she whispered against his lips, "1,000 times yes." They were married in the spring, when the land was coming alive with new growth and promise. The ceremony was small but joyful, attended by the few neighbors Zara had allowed herself to befriend over the years, along with Marshal Finley and his wife, who traveled from Silverton for the occasion. "Never thought I'd see the day," the marshal said, clapping Flynn on the shoulder at the reception. The Ghost Rider settled down with a wife and ranch. Flynn's arm tightened around Zara's waist. "Best decision I ever made." "And the bounty?" the marshal asked quietly. "Officially rescinded," Flynn replied. "Judge Carlton saw to that, said my testimony against Thornton and Cooper was worth more than old grievances from another territory." The marshal nodded, satisfied. "Good. The past should stay buried. You two deserve your future." As the years passed, that future unfolded with a richness neither Zara nor Flynn could have imagined on that fateful day when he first rode onto her land. The ranch expanded, their reputation for fair dealing and quality stock spreading throughout the territory. Their first child, a daughter they named Caroline, after Flynn's sister arrived a year after their wedding, followed 2 years later by a son they called James, in honor of Zara's father. On the 5th anniversary of their meeting, Flynn presented Zara with a gift, a carved wooden sign to hang at the entrance to their property. "Blackwood McAllister Ranch," it read, the letters burned deep into the pine. "It's perfect," Zara said, tracing the words with her fingertips. Flynn stood behind her, his arms encircling her waist. "Not bad for a woman who once swore she'd never trust a man again," he teased gently. Zara turned in his embrace, her eyes meeting his. "I was wrong about a lot of things back then." "Oh," Flynn raised an eyebrow. "Do tell, Mrs. McAllister." "I thought I could do everything alone. I thought trusting someone meant giving up my strength." She placed a hand on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "But loving you has made me stronger, not weaker." Flynn's eyes, still as clear and honest as the day they met, held hers with unwavering devotion. "You've always been the strongest person I know, Zara. That's why I fell in love with you. And here I thought it was my skill with a revolver," she said with a smile. Flynn laughed, the sound still a joy to her ears after all these years. "That too. Never met a woman who could outshoot me before. Or since," Zara added with a competitive gleam in her eye. "Or since," he agreed, bending to kiss her with the same tenderness that had marked their first kiss on the porch of what was now their home. As the sun set over their land, the land they had fought for together, the land where their children would grow up knowing both their mother's strength and their father's integrity, Zara thought about the journey that had brought them here. From the depths of grief and mistrust to the heights of love and partnership, it had been a path neither of them could have walked alone. In the end, she reflected, that was the true gift Flynn had given her, not just protection when she needed it most, but the knowledge that some battles were better fought side by side, and some burdens were lighter when shared with the right person. "What are you thinking about?" Flynn asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Zara smiled up at him, her heart full. "Just that, for someone who swore never to trust a man again, I chose pretty well when I finally did." Flynn's answering smile was as warm as the setting sun. "We both did." And as their children came running across the yard, laughing and calling for their parents, Zara knew with absolute certainty that her father would have approved of the man who now guarded his daughter and his legacy as if they were made of gold, because to Flynn McAllister, they were infinitely more precious than any treasure on earth. As the years continued to pass, the Blackwood McAllister Ranch became known throughout Colorado as one of the most prosperous and well-managed operations in the territory. Flynn's skill with livestock combined with Zara's sharp business acumen created a partnership that was the envy of many larger ranches. But more than their success, it was their reputation for fairness and integrity that set them apart in a land where such qualities were often in short supply. Their children grew strong and capable, absorbing their parents' values along with their skills. Caroline, now 10, had her father's quiet confidence and her mother's determination. She could ride as well as any boy her age, and showed a natural affinity for working with the horses that had become the ranch's specialty. Young James, at 8, was more thoughtful and deliberate, with a mind for numbers that suggested he might one day take over the business side of the ranch's operations. On a crisp autumn afternoon, as Zara stood on the porch watching Flynn teach James how to mend a saddle, a rider appeared on the horizon, a rare occurrence now that the railroad had come to Redemption Creek, making travel by horseback less common. As the figure drew closer, Zara recognized the familiar silhouette of Marshall Finley, older now but still sitting tall in the saddle. She waved in greeting, calling for Flynn to see who had come to visit. "Marshall," Flynn said warmly as the older man dismounted. "It's been too long." Finley clasped Flynn's hand firmly. Not Marshall anymore, retired last spring. His weathered face broke into a smile as he turned to Zara. "Mrs. McAllister, you're looking well." "As are you," Zara replied, embracing him affectionately. "Come inside. You must be tired after your ride." Over coffee and Zara's fresh baked bread, Finley shared news from around the territory, now well on its way to statehood. The conversation was easy and familiar until Finley's expression grew serious. "There's something you both should know," he said, setting down his cup. "Samuel Thornton's been spotted in Denver." Zara felt a chill run through her despite the warmth of the kitchen. "After all these years, I thought he'd gone to California." "He did," Finley confirmed. "Made another fortune in mining from what I hear. But he's back now, and word is he's been asking questions about the two of you." Flynn's hand found Zara's under the table, his touch reassuring. "Thornton's an old man now, just like the rest of us. What could he possibly want after 15 years? Finley shrugged. "Revenge, maybe. Some men can't let go of a grudge, especially men like Thornton who aren't used to losing." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "There's more. Silas Cooper was released from prison last month. Good behavior, they said." "And you think they might have reconnected," Flynn concluded, his expression hardening. "It's possible," Finley admitted. "Just thought you should be aware. Keep your eyes open." After Finley departed, promising to stay in touch with any new information, Zara and Flynn sat together on the porch swing that had replaced the simple bench where they had shared their first kiss all those years ago. "Are you worried?" Zara asked, leaning against Flynn's solid warmth. Flynn was quiet for a moment, his gaze scanning the land that had become such an integral part of their shared life. "Cautious," he finally said, "but not worried. We're not the same people Thornton knew. We're stronger now, more established." "And we have more to lose," Zara pointed out, thinking of their children playing inside. Flynn's arm tightened around her shoulders. "All the more reason to be vigilant. But I won't have us living in fear, Zara. We've built too much here to let Thornton's ghost haunt us." Zara nodded, drawing strength from his resolve as she had so many times before. "You're right. Besides, he's an old man now, as you said. What can he really do? the answer to that question came sooner than either of them expected. 2 weeks after Finley's visit, Flynn rode into Redemption Creek for supplies and returned with troubling news. Thornton's bought the mortgage on the old Miller place, he told Zara that evening after the children were asleep. He's moving back to the area. Zara's hand stilled on the quilt she had been mending. How close? Close enough, Flynn replied grimly. The Miller ranch borders our east pasture. What could he possibly want with a small ranch like that? Zara wondered aloud. A man with his money could buy half the county if he wanted to. Flynn's expression was troubled. It's not about the ranch. It's about proximity. The implications hung heavy in the air between them. Samuel Thornton, the man who had ordered the murder of Zara's father and tried to steal their land, would soon be their neighbor. In the days that followed, Flynn quietly increased security around the ranch. He and the hands they now employed kept a more vigilant watch on the herds, particularly those grazing near the boundary with what was now Thornton's property. The children were instructed not to ride out alone, a restriction that Caroline in particular chafed against but reluctantly obeyed after seeing the serious expressions on her parents' faces. A month passed with no sign of Thornton himself, though workers were seen making improvements to the Miller ranch house. Then, on a sunny Saturday when Zara was in town purchasing fabric for the children's winter clothes, she came face to face with her old enemy for the first time in 15 years. Samuel Thornton had aged, his once imposing frame slightly stooped, his hair now completely white. But the cold calculation in his eyes remained unchanged as he blocked Zara's path outside the general store. "Mrs. McAllister," he said, tipping his hat with mocking courtesy. "Or do you still prefer Blackwood?" Zara straightened her spine, refusing to show any sign of intimidation. "Thornton, I heard you were back in the area. Indeed I am." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Looking forward to being neighbors. How is that husband of yours?" "Still playing at being a respectable rancher. Flynn is and always has been a better man than you could hope to be," Zara replied evenly. "Now, if you'll excuse me." Thornton stepped aside, but his voice followed her. "You know, Mrs. McAllister, I've learned over the years that revenge is a dish best served cold. Very cold." Zara didn't dignify the threat with a response, but her hands trembled slightly as she mounted her horse for the ride home. She found Flynn in the barn, working with a young colt they were training for a buyer in Denver. "I saw Thornton in town," she said without preamble, setting down her packages. Flynn immediately left the colt in its stall and came to her side. "Did he threaten you?" "Not directly." Zara recounted the brief encounter, including Thornton's parting words. Flynn's jaw tightened. "I think it's time we had a conversation with our new neighbor. Make certain he understands that things are different now." The next day, Flynn rode alone to the Miller place, despite Zara's protests that they should confront Thornton together. "Someone needs to stay with the children," Flynn insisted. "And I'm not giving Thornton the satisfaction of thinking he can intimidate my wife." He returned hours later, his expression unreadable as he dismounted and handed the reins to one of their ranch hands. "Well?" Zara asked as they walked toward the house together. "Thornton wasn't there," Flynn said. "But Cooper was." Zara's breath caught. "Silas Cooper at Thornton's ranch." Flynn nodded. "Acting as foreman from the looks of it. He said Thornton's in Denver on business but would be pleased to receive me when he returns next week." "What do you think they're planning?" Zara asked, the old fear threatening to resurface. Flynn's hand found the small of her back, a reassuring pressure. "I don't know, but whatever it is, we'll face it together like we've faced everything else." That night, as they lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, Zara voiced the concern that had been growing in her mind since Finley's visit. Maybe we should send the children to stay with your cousin in Denver until this is resolved, she suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. Just to be safe. Flynn was quiet for a long moment, his hand stroking her hair. If that's what you think is best, he finally said. But remember what I told you all those years ago when Cooper and his men first threatened you. Zara smiled despite her worry, remembering clearly. You said bullies only win when good people run away. Exactly. Flynn pressed a kiss to her forehead. I don't want our children learning that running is the answer to trouble, but I also want them safe. It's your call, Zara. I'll support whatever you decide. Zara considered the question that had defined so much of her life: when to fight and when to yield. She thought of her father, who had stood his ground and paid with his life. She thought of Flynn, who had wandered for years before finding the courage to stop and build something lasting. And she thought of herself, the woman who had once sworn never to trust a man again, now planning a family's future with the one who had proven worthy of that trust. They stay, she decided firmly, but we'll be careful, very careful. The anticipated confrontation with Thornton came not at his ranch the following week, but at their own. Flynn was working with the horses in the corral when Caroline came running from the house. "Papa," she called, her voice high with excitement rather than fear. "Riders coming. Lots of them." Flynn immediately sent Caroline to fetch her mother from the garden while he moved to the front of the property, rifle in hand but not raised. 3 other ranch hands joined him, positioning themselves casually but strategically around the yard. Samuel Thornton led the approaching party, riding a magnificent black stallion that seemed chosen specifically to impress. Behind him came Silas Cooper and 4 other men, all armed but with their weapons holstered. Flynn stood his ground as the riders approached, his posture relaxed but alert. Zara emerged from the house and came to stand beside him, her hand resting lightly on the revolver she still wore when working around the ranch. "McAllister," Thornton called out as he reined in his horse. "And the lovely Mrs. McAllister. I've come to pay a neighborly visit." "You bring a lot of men for a neighborly visit," Flynn observed dryly. Thornton smiled thinly. "The roads aren't as safe as they once were. A man in my position can't be too careful." "What do you want, Thornton?" Zara asked directly, having no patience for pretense. Thornton dismounted with the stiffness of age, waving Cooper and the others to remain on their horses. "Straight to the point as always. I've always admired that about you, Mrs. McAllister, even when we were at odds." "We were never at odds," Zara replied coldly. "You murdered my father and tried to steal my land. Now state your business or leave." Something dangerous flashed in Thornton's eyes before he masked it with another insincere smile. "Very well. I've come to make you an offer for your water rights." Flynn and Zara exchanged a quick glance. Of all the things they had expected, this wasn't one of them. "Our water rights," Flynn repeated. "Yes," Thornton confirmed. "The spring on your northern boundary, I'm willing to pay handsomely for the right to tap it." Flynn's eyes narrowed. "The spring that feeds into the creek that runs through your property anyway. Why would you need rights to it?" "I'm developing my property differently this time," Thornton explained, his tone suggesting he was being entirely reasonable. "Planning to grow crops that require more consistent irrigation than the creek provides naturally." "The answer's no," Zara said firmly. "That spring serves our entire northern pasture. We're not selling access to it." Thornton's facade of friendliness slipped slightly. "I'm prepared to pay 3 times what it's worth." "It's not for sale at any price," Flynn stated. "Not to you." Thornton studied them both for a long moment, calculation evident in his gaze. "I see the years haven't softened either of you. Very well." He turned to remount his horse, movements deliberate. "But remember I asked nicely first." The threat hung in the air as Thornton and his men rode away, Cooper casting a particularly venomous glance over his shoulder. "He's up to something," Zara said once they were out of earshot. "That spring isn't worth what he's offering." Flynn nodded, his expression troubled. "No, it isn't, which means there's something he's not telling us." He squeezed her hand. "I think we need to ride out and take a closer look at exactly what he's doing with the Miller place." The following day, while their foreman kept watch at the ranch, Flynn and Zara rode out to inspect the boundary they shared with Thornton's new property. What they found confirmed their suspicions that something wasn't right. "He's not preparing for crops," Flynn said as they observed the activity from a concealed position on their side of the line. "Those men are prospecting." Zara watched as workers moved methodically across Thornton's land, taking soil samples and marking locations with small flags. "You think there's gold or silver," Flynn replied. "Either would explain why he's suddenly interested in water rights. Mining requires a lot of water, and if he's found a deposit that extends under our land, he needs our spring to extract it efficiently," Zara finished. "And if we won't sell, he'll try to take it some other way," Flynn concluded grimly. "Just like before." They rode back to the ranch in thoughtful silence, each contemplating the implications of their discovery. If Thornton had indeed found valuable minerals that extended beneath their property, they were facing a threat potentially more dangerous than his previous attempts to take their land. "We should consult a lawyer," Zara suggested, as they unsaddled their horses. "Find out exactly what rights we have if there is gold or silver under our land." Flynn agreed, and the next day they rode into Denver to speak with a lawyer who specialized in mining claims. What they learned was both reassuring and concerning. "According to territorial law, mineral rights belong to the property owner," the lawyer explained. "If there's gold under your land, it's yours, not Thornton's, even if the vein extends from his property." "And he can't force us to sell those rights?" Zara asked. "Not legally," the lawyer replied, his expression grave. "But men like Thornton often find ways around the law. Be careful." Armed with this knowledge, they returned home determined to protect what was theirs. Flynn sent word to Marshal Finley about their suspicions, while Zara wrote to Judge Carlton, now serving on the state Supreme Court, asking for his advice and intervention if necessary. For 2 weeks, an uneasy quiet settled over the ranch. Thornton made no further approaches, though they observed continued activity on his property. Then, without warning, disaster struck. Flynn was awakened in the middle of the night by one of their hands pounding on the bedroom door. "Fire!" the young man shouted. "The north barn's ablaze." They rushed to the scene to find the structure fully engulfed in flames, the heat so intense they couldn't get close enough to save the horses stabled inside. By dawn, all that remained was smoldering ruins and the grim task of burying the animals they had lost. "This wasn't an accident," Flynn said, examining the ground around what had been the barn's rear entrance. "Look here. Coal oil." Zara's hands clenched into fists. "Thornton." "We can't prove it," Flynn cautioned, though his own expression was hard with certainty. "But yes, I'd stake my life on it." 3 days later, as they were still dealing with the aftermath of the fire, a group of armed men rode onto their property. Not Thornton's men this time, but strangers wearing badges. "Mr. Flynn McAllister?" the leader asked, dismounting. "I have a warrant for your arrest." Zara stepped forward, placing herself between Flynn and the men. "On what charges?" The man produced an official-looking document. "Arson and attempted murder. Mr. Samuel Thornton's foreman was severely burned in a fire at their property last night." "That's ridiculous," Flynn protested. "I was here all night. My wife and a dozen hands can vouch for that." The officer shrugged. Take it up with the judge. I'm just here to bring you in. Zara's heart raced with fear and fury. This is Thornton's doing. He's framing my husband for his own crime. Madam, I don't know anything about that, but Mr. McAllister needs to come with us now. Flynn gently moved Zara aside, his eyes meeting hers with calm reassurance. It's all right. This is how the law works. I'll go with them, clear this up. Flynn, Zara began, but he squeezed her hand to silence her. Send word to Finley, he said quietly, and contact Judge Carlton. I'll be fine. As the officers led Flynn away, Zara fought against the crushing sense of déjà vu, once again watching a man she loved being taken from her because of Samuel Thornton's machinations. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't a young woman alone with no recourse. This time she had resources, connections, and 15 years of hard-won wisdom. James, she called to her son, who was watching wide-eyed from the porch. Ride to the Hopkins place. Ask Mr. Hopkins to send his fastest rider to Silverton with a message for former Marshal Finley. As James raced to follow her instructions, Zara turned to Caroline. Help me saddle the horses. We're going to Denver. The territorial court was now located in a grand stone building in Denver, a testament to Colorado's growing prosperity and imminent statehood. Zara, with Caroline beside her, strode through its imposing doors 3 days after Flynn's arrest, having ridden hard to reach the city in time for his hearing. Judge Carlton, true to his word from years earlier, had agreed to hear the case himself after receiving Zara's urgent telegram. As she entered the courtroom, she saw Flynn sitting at a table with a lawyer Finley had recommended, his expression calm despite the circumstances. Samuel Thornton sat on the opposite side of the room, Silas Cooper beside him with his arm heavily bandaged, evidence of the burns he claimed to have received during Flynn's supposed attack. When Flynn turned and saw Zara and Caroline, his face lit with relief and love. He mouthed, "I'm all right," to them as they took seats directly behind him. The proceedings began with the reading of the charges, followed by Thornton's attorney presenting their case. According to their account, Flynn had been seen skulking around Thornton's property the night of the fire, had deliberately set the blaze, and had attacked Cooper when the foreman attempted to stop him. Mr. Cooper will testify that he clearly saw the defendant's face in the firelight before being struck and pushed into the burning building, the attorney claimed. Judge Carlton, older now but still sharp-eyed and imposing, listened impassively before turning to Flynn's lawyer. And the defense? Flynn's attorney rose. Your Honor, Mr. McAllister was at his ranch the entire night in question, a fact that can be attested to by multiple witnesses, including his wife and several ranch hands. Furthermore, we have evidence that Mr. Cooper's injuries were sustained not during any attack, but during an accident related to illegal mining operations on Mr. Thornton's property. A murmur ran through the courtroom at this accusation. Judge Carlton banged his gavel once for silence. That's a serious allegation, he noted. Do you have proof? We do, Your Honor. The lawyer motioned to Zara, who rose and approached the bench, handing over a folder of documents. These are sworn statements from workers Mr. Thornton hired and then dismissed when they questioned the legality of his operations, the lawyer explained. They detail how Mr. Thornton has been conducting unauthorized mining that extends beyond his property lines, and how Mr. Cooper was injured when a blast went wrong, not in any attack by my client. Judge Carlton examined the documents carefully before looking up at Thornton, his expression stern. Mr. Thornton, are you engaged in mining operations on your property? Thornton rose, the picture of injured dignity. Some exploratory work only, Your Honor, perfectly legal. Without filing the proper claims, Judge Carlton pressed. "A mere oversight," Thornton replied smoothly. "But that has nothing to do with McAllister's criminal actions against my foreman." The judge turned back to Flynn's attorney. "Call your witnesses." One by one, Zara and the ranch hands who had accompanied her to Denver testified that Flynn had been at the ranch the entire night of the alleged attack. Then, in a surprise move, Flynn's lawyer called to the stand a man Zara didn't recognize, a slight, nervous-looking individual who kept glancing at Thornton with evident fear. "Please state your name for the court," the lawyer requested. "Edwin Mercer," the man replied, his voice barely audible. "And what is your occupation, Mr. Mercer?" I was an assayer for Mr. Thornton." The lawyer nodded encouragingly. "And can you tell the court what you discovered on Mr. Thornton's property?" Mercer swallowed hard. "A vein of silver. Significant. But it runs at an angle, extending under the McAllister ranch." "And what did Mr. Thornton instruct you to do with this information?" "To keep it quiet," he said. Mercer glanced nervously at Thornton again. "He said he'd handle getting access to the rest of the vein one way or another." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Carlton banged his gavel several times before order was restored. "Mr. Mercer," the judge asked directly, "were you present the night Mr. Cooper was injured?" Mercer nodded miserably. "Yes, Your Honor. We were setting charges to expand the mine shaft. Mr. Cooper was careless. The blast went off prematurely." Thornton leapt to his feet. "He's lying. This man was fired for incompetence. He's clearly been paid to perjure himself." "Sit down, Mr. Thornton," Judge Carlton ordered sharply. "You'll have your chance to respond." He turned back to Mercer. "And the accusations against Mr. McAllister?" "Fabricated, Your Honor," Mercer admitted. "Mr. McAllister wasn't anywhere near the property that night. Mr. Thornton ordered Mr. Cooper to injure himself deliberately and blame McAllister. Said it was the easiest way to get him out of the way." The revelation sent another wave of shock through the courtroom. Thornton's face had gone deathly pale, while Cooper stared daggers at the witness. After hearing additional testimony, including that of former Marshal Finley, who had arrived just in time to speak to Flynn's character and Thornton's history of underhanded dealings, Judge Carlton rendered his decision. "The charges against Flynn McAllister are dismissed," he announced firmly. "Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate investigation into Mr. Thornton's mining activities and these very serious allegations of false accusations and perjury." As court adjourned, Flynn enfolded Zara and Caroline in a tight embrace. "I knew you'd come through," he murmured against Zara's hair. "We're a family," Zara replied simply. "We fight for each other." Outside the courthouse, as they prepared to return home, they were approached by Edwin Mercer, who looked simultaneously relieved and terrified. "Mr. McAllister, Mrs. McAllister," he said, twisting his hat in his hands. "I wanted to apologize for my part in all this. I should have come forward sooner." Flynn studied the man for a moment before extending his hand. "You did the right thing in the end, Mr. Mercer. That's what matters." "Thornton will ruin me for this," Mercer said bleakly. Zara exchanged a glance with Flynn before addressing the assayer. "We could use someone with your expertise, Mr. Mercer. If you're interested in legitimate work, we might have a position for you." Hope flickered in Mercer's eyes. "You mean that?" Flynn nodded. "We do. It seems we may have silver on our property too. We'd want it extracted properly, legally, and sustainably." "I'd be honored," Mercer said, his relief palpable. As they rode home the next day, the family reunited and their immediate troubles behind them, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. From the solitary, mistrustful woman she had once been to the wife, mother, and ranch owner, it was a transformation she could scarcely have imagined when Flynn first rode onto her land. "What are you thinking?" Flynn asked, riding beside her with James on the saddle in front of him, while Caroline rode her own horse on Zara's other side. Zara smiled, the happiness in her heart reflected in her eyes. I was thinking about trust, how terrified I was to risk it again after my father died. Flynn reached across the space between their horses to take her hand briefly. And now I know that trusting the right person isn't a weakness, it's the greatest strength I've ever found. She looked at their children, riding proudly on their way back to the home they all cherished. That and the family we've built together. We're not done building yet, Flynn said with a meaningful smile. There's still plenty of room to grow in all ways. Zara's smile widened at his words, a secret joy filling her chest. She hadn't yet told Flynn her suspicion that a third child might be on the way, a suspicion the doctor in Denver had confirmed during their visit. That news could wait for a quiet moment at home, another beautiful chapter in the story they were writing together. As they crested the final hill overlooking their ranch, the late afternoon sun gilded the buildings and pastures with golden light. Home had never looked so beautiful, so full of promise. "Race you to the barn," Caroline called suddenly, urging her horse forward. James squealed with delight as Flynn loosened the reins, allowing their mount to follow at a more moderate pace. "Don't let her win, Papa," Zara laughed, the sound carrying on the clear mountain air as she too urged her horse into a gentle gallop. The four of them raced down the hillside toward home, toward the life they had built from nothing but love, trust, and the courage to believe in second chances. And in that moment, flying across the land that had witnessed both her greatest sorrows and her most profound joys, Zara knew that the vow she had made at her father's grave had been broken in the most beautiful way possible. She had learned to trust again, not blindly, but wisely, with her eyes wide open to both the risks and the rewards. In Flynn McAllister, the mysterious drifter who had guarded her like the precious treasure she was, she had found not just a protector, but a partner, a lover, a friend. And in the life they had created together, she had found a happiness her younger self could never have imagined possible. As the sun set behind the mountains that had witnessed their story unfold, Zara Blackwood McAllister rode home beside the man who had taught her that some promises were made to be broken, and some hearts were worthy of the risk of love.